We are here today because there is a human cost to SB 68. The citizens assembled here behind me come from all walks of life and every corner of our state. We are joined today by survivors and their families, the attorneys who represent them, advocacy groups like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, working people, and business owners, all who support common sense reforms that preserve Georgians' rights to seek justice in court when they are victims of violent crimes or suffer personal tragedies, but oppose SB 68 placing a premium on insurance profits over the safety and rights of all Georgians. This bill will give total immunity to bad actors, no matter how many dangers lurk on their properties, no matter how many times violence has occurred, and no matter how many safety measures they fail to take. Your claims would be completely barred. It will clog up our courts, and it will force survivors to testify over and over. It is not good for Georgians. It will cost lives. We want to keep Georgia safe. We want Georgians to maintain their access to justice. Here are our stories.
My name is Michael Roseberry, and I'm a survivor of trafficking. The first time I had a gun held to my head, I was just 19 years old. While other people my age were going to college, having late night study sessions, or figuring out who they wanted to be in life, I was being trafficked. I wasn't old enough to buy cigarettes or alcohol, but I was old enough to be bought and sold. I have one specific memory of sitting in the back seat of a car while my trafficker was driving. We pulled up to a hotel and I was told, "This is your new home." I remember in that moment feeling hopeful, thinking, in a crowded place like this, surely somebody will help me. My pimp had 4 to 8 girls under his control at any given time. While he orchestrated lonely men to come and purchase our bodies for their sexual deviances, surely the hotel would notice. With 40 cars coming in and out at any given moment, surely the hotel would notice. And with girls walking around in their underwear, never alone and never speaking unless spoken to, surely the hotel would notice. And then one day I was hit. In the middle of the hotel lobby, in front of the man behind the front desk. And in that moment, I knew the hotel noticed. But noticing and acting are two very different things. The hotel gave me hope, but it did not follow through. My trafficker wasn't just the man who beat me. He wasn't my only abuser. The Johns who raped me were not my only rapists. My traffickers weren't just the men who controlled me, they were the people who allowed it to happen. My trafficker was the man in the hotel lobby who watched me be abused and did absolutely nothing. My trafficker was the maid who emptied trash cans filled with used condoms and changed blood-stained sheets and still stayed silent. My traffickers were the hotel managers and owners who saw bruised and terrified girls day after day and still did nothing. I made it out alive, but I had friends who didn't. One friend died in critical condition at the hospital after being beaten in a hotel room by our pimp. Another friend died under a bridge hiding from hers. There are moms without daughters, and fathers who have lost their children, while these hotels have continued to make money. If the hotel had spoken up, those friends of mine might still be here today. They were complicit, and that makes them responsible. This bill would allow these very businesses to walk away without any consequences. It would take away one of the only forms of justice survivors have left: the ability to hold these businesses that enabled our abuse accountable. The statistics prove it. Between 2007 and 2019, over 80% of reported human trafficking cases in the U.S. involved hotels and motels. Civil lawsuits have been one of the few ways survivors have been able to seek justice. Yet even with these cases, less than 1% of traffickers are ever convicted. The first time I had a gun held to my head, I remember feeling fear. But more than that, I remember feeling unvalued and undignified. These lawsuits are not just about finances. While finances help, these lawsuits are about the return of dignity and value. To sit in a courtroom and be told that what happened to you was wrong means a whole lot more than money ever could. Today, we were asked for real solutions, and that is what we have. We have given real solutions. We have handed over an amendment to this bill that would allow survivors of trafficking to not be held to the same regard. If you pass this bill as it is, you are telling every single trafficker, every single hotel manager who ignored the bruises, every maid who emptied out those trash cans full of condoms, and every business owner who profited from our captivity that their silence is acceptable. If you pass this bill, you are making a statement that their profits matter more than our lives. Thank you.
Thank you. I stand here today as I stood here 4/24/24 of last year. Here, Governor Kemp signed House Bill 993. It was the first sexual grooming bill for Georgia. In honor of my daughter, our daughter, Jennifer Autumn Cobb, who at age 11 was sexually groomed by a former coach at the YMCA who was 18 years older than her. Because she was a child, she was afraid. She was brainwashed, and she did not tell. Most victims do not tell. The human brain does not develop until age 25. This bill, SB 68, I cannot support as written because the very victims we stood here and fought for last year would not be given the same civil rights today if this bill is written as is. We've asked for just a simple amendment so that victims of sexual abuse, trafficking, elder abuse, if the corporation is found negligent, then they should have the opportunity to file suit in a civil court. I'm here today for those victims. Our daughter was sexually groomed from 11 to 20. In this bill, a victim may have to testify 3 times. Our daughter got on the stand 1 time, and 1 time she said, "Please don't let him out on bail. He may prevent me from testifying." He was released on bail, and 6 days later, my daughter was found hung, she would have never made it to the second and the third round that this bill will require. I ask that you think before you pass this bill. It is just a simple amendment. If what is said is true, and if these rights are not denied, then we ask that you write it simply, simplify it so that we all understand it. And 5 years from now, we understand it. And 10 years from now, we understand it. And we're not fighting in the court of law trying to interpret what the hell it says. I beg you, for the victims, the future victims, today's victims, tomorrow victims, their lives matter. I'm a registered nurse, and we need to unite together as citizens of the United States of America. This is not a Republican. This is not a Democrat. This is not an independent issue. This is a civil rights human issue. My daughter loved, and she loved with all her heart, and she loved humans. And the reason she had the strength to come forward is because she saw her predator using the same tactics with little girls. And she said, Mom, I want to tell the truth. I don't want this to happen to another child. I don't want this to tear another family apart. But my daughter should be standing here today. She's not. I am her voice. And people say, how do you do it? And I will tell you, God is my strength. I give glory to God. And the love that I have for my daughter, I will carry till my last breath. I made a promise when she died that I would fight for the justice she was denied in life. I would fight that she would receive it in death, and I would stand and fight for victims, current and future, and I am here today to fight for you victims. You deserve to have your day in civil court. You deserve your civil rights. Do not pass this bill without it being amended, I beg you.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Verna. My daughter was Nicole. She was beaten by a bat in a convenience store. I'm 70 years old. I'm without my daughter. She was my only daughter. The management and the owners knew that this person was beating other people. An 80-year-old lady was beaten as well. But my daughter almost bled to death. I'm here on behalf of all the other victims. And I like to say, too, to the voting people, please, I'm 70 years old, I still work, but I miss my daughter. They brought her cell phone to me across the street at my job in a brown paper bag, and I have to come to work every day and remember that. But just like my other person that, okay, just please vote no. It could be your relative, it could be your friend, it could be someone else that you know that's close to you. Just like she said, this isn't a black, white, Republican, Democrat thing. This is a human thing. This is my daughter. Please vote no. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Morgan Graber. What does one say with these moments that they're given? Which of the thousands of cases that I've worked on, the thousands of families that I've helped, the thousands of victims that my firm has assisted, do I pull from to try to show and tell you just how devastating SB 68 is, not just to the cases I've worked on, but to every case and every client moving forward? Do I tell you the story of a mother who I've held in my arms outside of a courtroom in a hallway as she sobbed uncontrollably as the lifeless picture of her child flashed on the trial screen? No mother should have to endure that once, twice, or potentially 3 times, as mandatory bifurcation would require? Do I tell you that she's told me that no day feels worth living without her son? Do I tell you the stories of who he was, that he loved Jesus and history and airplanes? Do I tell you how he went to a property for a work purpose, safe, healthy, vibrant, and to no fault of his own, lost his life? Do I tell you how the people who worked there were engaging in a dangerously inherent activity? Do I tell you how they weren't trained to do that activity? Do I tell you how his parents found out that he had been hurt and spent hours in the car trying to make it to the hospital to see him one more time? Do I tell you that when they arrived, blood bags lined the hallway and their son was on life support? Do I tell you what it felt like to have a mother tell me how she told her only son goodbye? Or do I tell you how being able to file this lawsuit made the business, and as a result, all of us here today safer? Do I tell you how filing this lawsuit caused the business to recognize their wrongs, to implement a new training program, and as a result, a robust safety program for all employees, making them and all of us safer? Do I tell you how this lawsuit, although horrific, likely prevented multiple other tragedies from occurring? Or do I tell you the story of one of my clients who was nearly killed on his motorcycle, how he was on his way to the Fulton County office to pay his taxes? Do I tell you that physically he can't be here today because it would require him to get up, to put his prosthetic on, to take one of his 26 daily medications, to make the hour drive down from Alpharetta, all while likely twitching, convulsing, and seizing due to the permanent neurological injury he has? As someone with a traumatic brain injury, do I tell you how he couldn't be here today because the crowds, the noise, overwhelm him, would give him anxiety and significant stress? While he can't be here today, his wife is, and she will talk to you later. She would tell you that being able to file this lawsuit not only gave their family the opportunity to pursue justice, but to be able to have a sliver of hope for the life that they once had. But more importantly, the lawsuit, through discovery, required this company to take safety seriously. And as a result of this lawsuit, we are certain that this business now hires drivers that are trained and that are qualified, which they did not do before. Her husband lost his leg, his ability to think, to feel, and to operate as the man he once was before this wreck. Her husband was forced to sit through a grueling deposition where, again, he shook, he seized, and he stammered, trying to remember what had happened to him and what life he had lost as a result of this wreck. When I asked their family, would they continue on with their case if they knew they'd have to try it not once, not twice, but maybe 3 times, it was a unanimous no. Her husband has attempted to take his life on multiple occasions. The medications he takes daily, the appointments he goes to, and the therapy he participates in are what allows him to fight one more day. The idea that there's a day on the horizon for all of us here in Georgia where we may not be able to fight these fights one more day deeply saddens me. Not for myself, not for anyone just behind me, but for every client in the future to come. There is a piece of this bill that will affect every type of case moving forward, from car wrecks to premises liability to negligent security cases to medical malpractice. Reform may come, and that is necessary, but we must do it in a way that protects the great people of our state, and SB 68 as written simply is not that.
Hi, my name is Genesis Wilson, and I'm a proud sex trafficking survivor. April 1st, 2021, present was Judge Brown, my mother, my dad, and my big brother, and my legal team. 4 years ago, I didn't see any good in a situation that I survived, but today I stand before you thankful. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't change anything, and I am who I am today because of what happened to me. I've developed a heart big for women who've been through sexual assault or sex trafficking, and I hope to one day share my story and save another woman who is stuck in this terrible situation and give her hope to remain strong and hold her head high. She and I are much more than the pain we had to endure for a man's greed, and I know for a fact God didn't let us go through that for no reason. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you almost 4 years later from reading that victim impact statement, living in complete answered prayers. I read that statement as a young, newly traumatized 21-year-old. I was homeless with a substance abuse problem and emotionally destructive, but I still had dreams and aspirations for myself. Due to the trauma I experienced from being sex trafficked, I was unable to attend college that summer because I had to relocate to another state for my safety. Unfortunately, I was never able to go back on that path I intended after high school, but today I stand before you as a proud youth project coordinator for a nonprofit that offers pathways to wellness for women overcoming sex trafficking, prostitution, and addiction called Divas Who Win Freedom Center. I lead 15 young teenagers offering my experience and guidance to help prevent the youth in my community from ending up in the same situation. If I would have never received a settlement for my pain and suffering, I don't think that I would be able to cause the same impact in my community how I do. I was unable to afford health care and therapy prior, and therapy has really helped me process my emotions and be able to advocate for other survivors. My settlement has given me a purpose and motivated me to speak out about my trauma because I am no longer stuck in it. I believe I would have been a lost soul due to the abuse of my trafficker and the negligence of the establishments where the trafficking took place. I want to be able to see the same justice for my brothers and sisters who are also survivors of sex trafficking, and I ask that there be an exception in this reform bill for sex trafficking survivors so that we don't lose again and are able to receive justice. Thank you.
My name is Shonda Santana. I'm the founder of Divas Who Win Freedom Center. I'm the mother of a survivor, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. Honorable members of the General Assembly, members of the press, advocates, and allies. 4 days ago, I stood before you as a mother, as an advocate, as a woman who has lived the weight of survival and turned it into a fight for justice. I told you the story no parent should ever have to tell, the story of a call that changed my life, the story of a daughter who should have been protected but instead was exploited in spaces that saw her as disposable. And today I stand before you again, not in opposition, but in invitation. I stand here in the belief that the people in this room, legislators, journalists, community leaders, want what is right. That when given the choice between shielding profit or protecting the most vulnerable, we will choose humanity. That we will choose a world where justice is not an abstract promise, but a practice written into our laws, reflected in our policies, and felt in the lives of those who have survived the unthinkable. We have a decision before us. A decision that will shape whether businesses that profit from the trafficking of our children are held accountable or whether they are given a free pass. We know the truth. Civil lawsuits have already led to the closure of 5 of the worst trafficking hubs in Atlanta, not because the government stepped in, but because survivors, armed with the power of the law, demanded accountability. This exception that we are calling for today is not about punishment, but it's about responsibility. It is about the simple, undeniable fact that no place of business should be allowed to turn a blind eye to human trafficking and still operate without consequence. So let's be clear. Accountability is not an attack on business. Accountability is a commitment to the dignity and the safety of the most vulnerable among us. If a business has knowingly ignored trafficking, facilitated it, or profited from it, they should not be shielded from legal consequences. That is not just a policy decision. That is a moral line in the sand. To the members of the House and Senate, this is your opportunity to lead, to be on the right side of history, to set a precedent that says Georgia does not tolerate complicity in trafficking, that we stand with survivors, not just in words, but in action. To the members of the press, your words shape public understanding. The stories you tell influence policy, shift public opinion, and amplify the voices of those who have fought so hard to be heard. We ask you to shine a light on the realities of trafficking and the urgent need for accountability. This is not another political debate. This is about lives, futures, and justice that refuses to wait. And to the survivors and families in this fight, you are not alone. You have never been alone. Your voices, your resilience, your courage are why we are here today. We are not just fighting for a piece of legislation. We are fighting for justice, for dignity, for the promise that the system will not fail you again. There is more than a bill. This is a defining moment, a moment where we decide what kind of state we will be, what kind of nation will we build. So let us move forward together. Let us write laws that do more than sit on paper, but stand as shields for those who need them most. Let us ensure that justice is not just promised, but practiced. We invite you to stand with us. We invite you to lead with us. And we invite you to be a part of a future where safety is not a privilege, but it is our right.
Hello. I'm here today to speak for my son. I'm here to speak for my family. And I'm here to speak for all of the other families who have been failed by the organizations that they thought would protect them. SB 68 is not good for the people of Georgia. It protects businesses and insurance profits over the most vulnerable among us. Please do what is right and amend this bill to protect sex trafficking survivors, sexual assault victims, child abuse victims, and elder abuse victims. It is our duty to protect these innocent people. Please change the bill to be clear in these areas and allow these survivors to hold the people that harmed them accountable and ensure that they cannot continue to harm people the way that they have. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good afternoon. My name is Michael Berry. 25 years ago, I went to my friend's apartment, which was a pretty violent neighborhood. I didn't know it at the time, but two guys came up behind me and they shot me, which made me end up being paralyzed for the rest of my life. And without civil justice, I wouldn't have been able to afford all the necessities that I need as far as physical therapy, equipment for my house to modify it. So SB 68 is bad for civil justice and it's bad for Georgia. And it's not just a windfall, it's actually helping people continue their lives and create better future for themselves and for their families. So please say no to SB 68.
Good afternoon. My name is Melanie Manis. I'm 40 years old, and I too am a survivor of sex trafficking in Atlanta. A few years ago, Georgia senators started something fabulous in protecting women such as myself. They passed the Debbie Vance Act, and I was the first survivor in Metro Atlanta area to have my criminal record vacated, restricted, and sealed. I was not identified by the things that I had done or the things that I was pushed to do by my trafficker. You guys have brought a lot of this a long way in trying to help survivors. But why does it stop there? Why are we just going to stop there and protect them and let them start to rebuild themselves, start to take the price tag off of them, and then make it harder for them? Things have been hard enough, and women have been silenced. Children have been silenced long enough. When to eat, what to wear, look at the ground, don't speak unless spoken to. It is because of the Debbie Vance Act that I am now a small business owner and a productive member of society. And I thank you to the senators and the people in Georgia for that. But let's continue this movement with helping survivors. Don't drop the ball and say, we're going to help you this far, but we're going to make you fight even harder for the rest of it. There are women and children out there still being sold with a barcode and a price tag. Once was so hard when I went through trial to share my story, deposition, all of it. I couldn't do it again. So if I can't do it again and I run, then what does Georgia say? Georgia says the hotels wins and profit again comes over human beings, people. Why is that correct? It's not. By the grace of God, I got a settlement and I was able to receive the help that I really needed. Therapy, counseling, getting involved in helping other people. I wasn't asked to be here today. I came the other day and I said, you know what? I took it this far, so you know what? I need to follow through in helping those who have no voice. And that's what the state of Georgia needs to do. They need to continue what they started with the Debbie Vance Act and take it one step further and make an exception for women and children. Is profit over people the type of state we want to be? Because you know what? It's by God's grace and mercy that today there's no one to tell me what to eat, what to wear, how to do it, any of it. Where to walk, how to answer the phone. I don't have to fall asleep in my bed at night and be in fear that I'm going to be burnt with cigarettes because I fell asleep. I can fall asleep today knowing that justice was served for me. But it's not just about me. It's about everybody else behind me. Everything these days is about money, 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 money. But what about the people? We don't have a voice. We finally have a voice. And now these settlements allow women like myself to rebuild themselves, to find out who God created them to truly be. And for this moment, God has asked me to be a voice for those still in the dark. Georgia, you started a good thing with the Debbie Vance Act and helping women regain their life. Help them regain it completely and amend this for other survivors behind me. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Preston Dunaway. I am an attorney here in Atlanta. My law firm represents victims of violent crimes. And what I'd like to talk to you today about is two women, really three women. The first is an elderly woman. She lived in an apartment complex in Cobb County, Georgia. That apartment complex ignored pleas, repeated pleas for security guards. She was raped for hours by a complete stranger, and she was a victim and a survivor. The difference in what the insurance companies don't want you to know is that we and the insurance lawyers, along with us, went to the prison where the rapist was being housed. And what did he state? He stated that he would have never committed the crime. He would have never committed the rape if a security guard would have been on site like the owner and the management company were recommended. The second lady that I want to talk about, she's here today. I've asked her to stand to the side to protect her anonymity, but she's the daughter of an 11-year-old child who was also living at an apartment complex in Cobb County, Georgia. The owner of that complex does not live in Georgia, is not a Georgia resident. He ignored the recommendation from a professional property management company to have on-site security patrols. Months later, her daughter was kidnapped in the parking lot and raped at that apartment complex. They are survivors. Say no to SB 68. The insurance company and their lawyers don't want you to hear these stories, but they need to be heard. Thank you for your time.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Hogue. Bear with me. I am a survivor of sex trafficking, human trafficking. I am the voice for those who cannot be heard, living and no longer living. Not everybody has a support system. Not everybody has somebody that says, hey, you got this. For almost 8 years of my life, I had no choice. I had no voice. There was no option. There was no way out. Nobody saw the signs. Nobody acknowledged it. It was completely swept under a rug. Completely. A few years back, I had a way out. I got a settlement, and it gave me stability to provide for my 2 daughters, who are both technically handicapped. I am an autism mom. I am a PFFD mom. My child grew with a small leg. Medical teams in the hospital did not acknowledge it. Again, I am the voice for the silent, and today our voices will be heard. What would you do if it was your daughter? What would you do if it was your son? What would you do if it was your family? That's it.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Mitchell. I'm an attorney who represents children who've been victimized, abused, and neglected. I'm a mother of 2 small children myself who are currently at a child care facility so I could come and do my job and speak to you all here today. My husband is a small business owner in the insurance field, and we both have lived with our family in Georgia our entire lives. I'm standing here today as a mother, a concerned Georgia citizen, and also an advocate for children. My clients have been victimized at places and businesses that were supposed to care and protect them. These are daycares, after-school programs, and summer camps. Those businesses cannot be held criminally liable the way that maltreaters can in this state. The only recourse for those victims is through the civil justice system. SB 68, as it's currently written, makes child care facilities, programs, and businesses less safe for Georgia children, and no one seems to be talking about those unintended consequences of this bad bill. SB 68 will absolutely put up barriers for families whose lives have been turned upside down by child abuse. You all see all the news outlets here today. I know all of you have reported on child abuse situations, improper sexual touching of children, drugging children via medication, and both physical and mental abuse. I'd like to share with you the story of my client, Justice, who is a little boy who I've been honored to represent for the last 2 years. This is a picture of Justice when he was 2 years old. His family moved to Georgia when his mom got a great job at a national company, and she enrolled her son Justice and his sister in a child care facility right outside of Horseshoe Bend Country Club. Justice was abused from the time that he entered the doors of that school until he was eventually unenrolled. He was repeatedly, physically and emotionally abused, and the daycare did nothing. This went on for months. He was kicked, hit, dragged across the floor, mocked, left alone in the classroom as punishment, and even had his head shoved in a trash can. The daycare had a camera surveillance system that captured all of this abuse. But the daycare's position in the lawsuit that we brought was that it just didn't have actual knowledge of the abuse because they never looked at the cameras. As written, SB 68 would absolutely give daycares and child care facilities that turn a blind eye to abuse on their premises completely off the hook. I know in my heart that this is not the intended consequence that any lawmaker in this building wants, and it's certainly not anything that any Georgia parent wants. Justice's mother shared her story on social media, and a lot of parents had comments because they had no idea what the contents or the effect of SB 68 would be. One lawmaker actually reached out to her and they had a conversation last night. Justice's mother spoke with this particular House rep about her story and about her concerns about SB 68. She, like many parents, are concerned that there's no carve-out for child abuse victims, sex assault victims, sex trafficking survivors, and the elderly. This particular rep said, quote, he didn't believe that the law would be interpreted that way as it pertains to child care cases, but he wasn't a lawyer and he wasn't sure. The safety and security of Georgia children is not something that lawmakers in this state can be unsure about. Why not put an amendment in this bill right there in black and white that sends a message to bad companies that Georgia values and protects the elderly, sex abuse victims, sex trafficking survivors, and children like Justice? That is what we're asking for, and that is what Georgia deserves. Thank you.
My name is Charlie Ahmad. I am a security consultant and a retired Deputy United States Marshal. I spent 25 years serving with the United States Marshal Service. Prior to that, I was in the United States Army as an infantry soldier. And I stand before you as someone who spent the best years of his life safeguarding people, protecting potential victims from harm. And what I can tell you with certainty is SB 68 does the opposite of that. SB 68 erodes the system of accountability that is currently in place, requiring business owners and property managers to put reasonable security measures in place at their facilities. Our firm does the analysis post-violent crime as part of this civil litigation process. And what I can tell you, while there's disagreement on SB 68, having worked with attorneys, both on the plaintiff side and on the insurance defense side, there is no disagreement that SB 68 will cause a rise in crime. Let me say that again. This will cause a rise in crime. When you take away the system of accountability that requires reasonable security measures, crime will go up. As law enforcement ranks go down, as response times lengthen, if you don't have any security measures in place at these properties, crime will go up. That I can promise you. The other point I want to make is in my work as a security consultant, I've spoken with many property managers and many business owners about installing reasonable security measures. They're all upset about having to pay out what they call nuclear lawsuits. Well, I can tell you that installing reasonable security measures that will keep people safe is much cheaper. The other thing I would like to tell you is many of those same business owners and property managers are not interested in installing security measures because of SB 68. What they're saying is the people standing behind me don't matter. Profit over people, as has been said before. Thank you very much.
My name is Andy Rogers, and I'm a lawyer who's had the privilege and the honor of representing multiple people who've not had a voice for themselves. I was a prosecutor for 5 years, municipal court judge for 7 years. I've been a lawyer for a total of 37 years, and I have spent all of that time gladly, willingly, listening to, representing, speaking on behalf of, and trying to help families who were victimized by criminals who took advantage of an opportunity to commit a crime because there were no effective measures in place to deter them or to cause them to go somewhere else. All of the stories you've just heard, and those that could be told here for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, and certainly for the rest of this session, should never be told. They are all stories of suffering and loss by numerous families who would have no such stories to tell if the places where they lived, where they left their children to be cared for, where they paid money to a business for goods and services, had simply acted reasonably in the face of known and preventable risks of harm from criminals. All of these stories have been proven in Georgia courts to be the result of failures by irresponsible property owners to have appropriate security policies and procedures in place, the result of failures to take steps to know what types of crimes are happening on their properties, and more importantly, why they're happening and what they need to do to prevent them from happening in the future. And failures to be truthful and warn the very people who are paying them to keep their families and children safe about the dangers and the dangerous people present on their properties. That is what Georgia's current law seeks to provide and motivate responsible business owners to do. The sad and frightening truth is that even if there were no SB 68 and no other effort to limit lawsuits against careless property owners, there would still be rapes. There would still be child molestations and trafficking and shootings and murders that would devastate entire families and entire communities in some cases. School shootings have arrived in Georgia. Those would be covered by this bill. There is simply nothing in any of the laws being considered in this session to protect the next generation of people who will, but never should, ever have a story to tell. There is nothing in any of these new laws that would tell any property owner, especially the most irresponsible and careless, that they are required to do anything more or anything different from what they've been doing all along. Those things that have left innocent people exposed to the violence that they've experienced. The current version of SB 6, however, has been written so that all of these stories would be very different in how they end. Those in support of the bill have publicly testified that they believe that those who have been injured and those who've lost family members due to irresponsible decisions and conduct of business owners should be made whole. That's what the law seeks to provide. We hope the governor and the House and all of Georgia's lawmakers will be willing to pass laws that help innocent victims of crimes that could have and should have been prevented, especially against the most vulnerable, those being the children, the elderly, and all victims of sexual assault, rather than providing more legal hurdles to hold everyone accountable who failed to keep them safe.
We stand before you united with pure intentions of safety for our families and access to justice. We have offered amendments to the committee, and we would like to work together to ensure that Georgia is a safe and fair place to call home, do business, and raise our families. We have attorneys ready to field questions. Thank you.
I'm Kara Phillips. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I'll also mention that there are people here who have not even had an opportunity to speak, who have stories. You're welcome to ask them questions one-on-one, but any questions right now while we're here as a group? Yes.
A line in the bill that does say that people could bring civil suits in cases of sex trafficking. How would your amendment make sure, but clearly there are still concerns about people's ability to do so, so what would the amendment do and how would it make sure that people could bring these suits?
Yes, thank you. The question was, there's currently an attempt to carve out sex trafficking survivors in the SB 68 as it's currently drafted. The problem with SB 68 is that it says all negligence claims and all nuisance claims would not be available to survivors of sex trafficking. So the only thing that the bill protects is a very new provision that allows survivors to seek civil justice for their sex trafficking under a separate sex trafficking statute. It has not been thoroughly tested by Georgia courts. It's been tested by federal courts, and it's not great. But under Georgia law for decades, sex trafficking survivors are to be protected by business owners exercising ordinary care to keep the place safe and not creating what's called a nuisance. And SB 68 eliminates that. So an easy fix is to simply add in a carve-out for all survivors of any kind of sexual abuse, assault, rape, sodomy, and trafficking, anything under Georgia code for sexual crimes, just carve them out. And we're also asking for a carve-out for children and the elderly, because we know that these are the most vulnerable victims and members of our society. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hi there. Is there any validity to the governor's contention that the current climate is disadvantageous to Georgia business?
There is not. Currently, Georgia is a top business environment. Currently, Georgia is a great place to do business. Currently, Atlanta is thriving. So there is no reason for the governor to suggest that on the backs of the people behind me, on the backs of the victims who can't even be here, that instead Georgia businesses are somehow hurting. Thank you.
What is your response to claims from proponents of tort reform who say that lawsuits are being brought frivolously against businesses?
Yeah, the question around frivolous lawsuits is a good one. And I will tell you that you need to look at the facts behind the case. In every case that I have seen go to trial and result in a very big verdict, there was no effort to resolve the case before it went to trial, or very little. And ultimately, juries that are made up of 12 citizens came to an agreement in every one of those lawsuits as to the number that made the person whole. And that is a constitutional right that we have under Georgia law. So I will also say, when it comes to sex trafficking survivors, sexual abuse survivors, the elderly and children, they do not want to bring a lawsuit. They want to have been protected in the first place. And the last thing they want to do is have to get up and tell their story. And the ones that have done it bravely, and there is nothing frivolous about that.